Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that, well, it affects every single decision we make, often without us even realizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Cognitive biases.
Right. They're basically a mental shortcuts our brains take. Super useful sometimes for speed.
Yeah, definitely.
But they can also lead to some, well, pretty significant errors in judgment.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Sources like the Implicit Bias Workbook from the Center for Innovation and Resources and articles on Very Well Mind, they all stress how everyone, literally everyone, is susceptible to these kinds of mental quirks.
That's exactly right. And our goal today really is to explore some of the key ones, the biases that can, you know, steer our decision-making, whether we're aware of it or not.
Okay.
We've pulled together insights from quite a few places: Forbes, Very Well Mind, Healthline, also Kevin Delaplante's work, the Decision Lab, PON at Harvard Law,
Oh, wow.
and even summaries from the USIAD Alumni Association on Daniel Kahneman's big one, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Okay. Quite the lineup. So what specifically are we digging into today? What biases are on the list?
Well, we've picked out 8 that seem to pop up again and again. We're talking confirmation bias,
Okay.
hindsight bias, anchoring bias, the misinformation effect,
Gotcha.
actor-observer bias. You might know that as the fundamental attribution error.
Right, right.
The false consensus effect, self-serving bias, and finally, the availability heuristic.
Okay, that's a packed agenda. Ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's kick off with confirmation bias. This one's, like, really fundamental.
Okay.
It's basically our tendency to favor information that confirms what we already believe
And ignore the rest.
and kind of brush aside
Yeah.
anything that challenges those beliefs.
Yeah.
It's selective attention, really.
Right. Very well. Mine has some great, really relatable examples of this. Like, if you have strong feelings about, say, gun control or climate change, you might find yourself only clicking on articles or posts that echo what you already think.
Totally. Or even curating your social media feed so you're mostly just hearing from people who agree with you.
Yeah, actively avoiding different viewpoints. It's like building your own little echo chamber.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how this links to something Kevin Delaplante talks about, this idea that humans are basically pattern recognition machines.
Okay.
Our brains are wired to find patterns, make sense of things, but that drive can sometimes make us see patterns.
Yeah.
Well, where there aren't any.
Like seeing faces in clouds.
Exactly. Things like apophenia, pareidolia, seeing those faces, or even that weird backmasking thing in music.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that Britney Spears example on jeffmilner.com.
Right.
You listen normally, it's just sounds. Then someone suggests a backward message.
And suddenly you think you hear it.
It's kind of spooky how expectation shapes perception.
It really is. And this pattern-seeking thing makes us super vulnerable to confirmation bias because we latch on to anything that seems to fit our existing pattern or belief.
So how does this actually get in the way of, clear thinking?
Well, Kevin Delaplante uses that Dr. Jones example, right? We focus on the fact that, say, a high percentage of his patients got better,
Okay.
but we totally miss the crucial question. What was the improvement rate without his treatment? The baseline.
So we're only seeing the confirming evidence.
Exactly. We're not looking at the whole picture, just the part that fits our initial idea. It's like
Yes.
only asking happy customers for feedback.
Right, you're not seeking out info that could prove you wrong. Delaplante also mentioned something about an evolutionary angle, social persuasion.
Yeah, the thinking there from an evolutionary psychology perspective is that maybe favoring information that aligns with our group helps strengthen social bonds.
Okay.
Made us more persuasive within the tribe, maybe. Less about objective truth, perhaps, and more about group cohesion and influence back then.
Huh. Interesting thought. Okay, let's shift gears. Hindsight bias. This is the I knew it all along one, right?
That's the one. That feeling after something happens, you look back and think, oh yeah, I saw that coming, even if you really didn't at the time.
Very well. Mine mentioned that classic study, didn't they? About Clarence Thomas's Supreme Court confirmation.
Yeah, they polled college students before the confirmation, then polled them again after he was confirmed.
And what happened?
A much higher percentage remembered believing he'd be confirmed than had actually predicted it beforehand.
Wow. So our memory kind of rewrites itself to match the outcome?
It seems that way, which leads to a potential problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, what's the downside if we always think we predicted things correctly?
Well, it can lead to overconfidence, right? You start thinking you're a better predictor than you actually are.
And that could lead you to take maybe unwise risks down the line.
Precisely. Believing your foresight is better than it is. Okay, moving on to anchoring bias.
Right. This is where the first piece of information really sticks.
Yeah, it has this huge influence on whatever comes next, even if that first piece of info isn't, super relevant or reliable. Neurologically, it sets a kind of marker.
Oh, this one feels like it's everywhere. Like in negotiations, right. Very well. Mind and Healthline both talk about that first price setting the stage.
Absolutely. It anchors the whole discussion. And remember Kevin Delaplante's roulette wheel example.
Oh, yeah, that was wild. A random number influencing estimates about African nations in the UN.
Exactly. Shows how even totally irrelevant numbers can anchor our thinking.
And it affects experts, too, right? Like doctors. Their first impression can potentially bias a diagnosis.
It certainly can, which is why it's interesting what Forbes suggests in their Skill 11, setting a policy.
What's that?
They basically say you have to consciously try to de-anchor yourself. Recognize the anchor is there and actively push your thinking beyond it, outside your comfort zone.
Makes sense. Requires effort, though.
Definitely. And anchoring's used strategically, too, isn't it? The PON website talks about this in negotiations.
Yeah, and Delaplante's example of a government putting out a low casualty number early on.
Right, to anchor public perception. Even if the real number turns out to be much higher later, that first number has already shaped expectations.
Powerful stuff. Okay, next. The misinformation effect. This one sounds serious, especially regarding memory.
It really is. It's about how our memories aren't fixed recordings.
And
They can actually be altered, even contaminated by information we get after an event.
wow.
Our memory is way more malleable than we tend to think.
Very well. Mine used that classic Elizabeth Loftus study, the car crash video one.
Yeah, exactly. Just changing one word.
Hit versus smash.
Right. That small change significantly influenced whether people later remembered seeing broken glass, even though there wasn't any.
That's unsettling. How easily suggestion can distort memory. And you mentioned earlier, maybe our other biases, like confirmation bias, can make this worse.
That's a really good point. Yeah, if the misinformation aligns with what we already believe or want to believe, we might be more likely to accept it and integrate it into our memory.
So the consequences. I mean, at work, misremembering details could cause big problems.
Misunderstandings, errors, absolutely. And in legal contexts, eyewitness testimony, the potential for harm is huge. False identifications, wrong convictions.
Yeah, definitely sobering. Okay, let's switch to actor-observer bias, fundamental attribution error.
Right. Same idea, different names.
This is about how we explain our own behavior versus other people's.
Exactly. As Very Well Mind and that fundamental attribution error theory article explain, when we do something, especially something negative, we tend to blame external factors, the situation.
Like, I was late because the traffic was terrible.
Precisely. But when we see someone else do the same thing,
We blame them. They're just disorganized or they didn't leave early enough.
we jump to internal dispositional causes,
Well-
their personality, their character.
Very Well Mind's example. If
Yeah.
I mess up a meeting, I blame jet lag. If someone else does, I think they're unprepared.
And that Healthline study about the near car accident, the driver blames external factors. The person behind blames the driver's carelessness. Same event, different attributions based on perspective.
That connects to blaming the victim too, doesn't it? As mentioned in that theory article.
It does. It's easier sometimes to attribute misfortune to someone's character rather than considering complex situational or systemic factors.
And culture plays a role here too. Individualistic societies like the US lean more towards internal explanations.
That's what the research suggests, yeah. Cultural norms shape our default ways of explaining things.
Okay. Next bias. False consensus effect.
The everyone thinks like me bias.
Pretty much. Very well. Mine describes it as our tendency to overestimate how much other people share our own beliefs, our behaviors, attitudes, values.
You think your opinion on a hot topic is the majority view? Or you overestimate how many people like the same music you do, for example?
Why do we do that? What's behind it?
Well, a couple of things. One, we tend to hang out with people who are similar to us, right?
Sure. Friends, colleagues.
So our own views get reflected back at us constantly, creating this illusion of consensus. And frankly, it feels good for our self-esteem to think our views are the norm. It's validating.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, how about self-serving bias? This feels related, maybe. But more about success and failure.
It's definitely in the same ballpark of protecting our ego. Self-serving bias, as Very Well Mind and Healthline explain, is taking credit for successes.
I got an A because I'm smart.
Exactly, attributing it to internal factors. But when we fail,
I failed the test because it was unfairly difficult.
right, We blame external factors. It protects our self-image.
Healthline mentioned age and sex can influence this too.
Yeah, there seems to be some variation, but the core function is self-protection. The downside, of course, is it can give us a skewed view of reality and lead us to unfairly blame others when things go wrong.
Right, avoiding responsibility. Okay, last one on our list, the availability heuristic.
This one's all about mental shortcuts based on memory recall.
How easily things come to mind.
Precisely. We estimate how likely or frequent something is based on how easily we can think of examples, as Very Well Mined and that USAID summary of Kahneman point out.
Like the plane crash example.
Exactly. People often think plane crashes are a bigger risk than, say, diabetes, just because crashes are dramatic, heavily reported, and easy to recall. They're more available in our memory.
So if there was a recent news story about car thefts nearby, I might suddenly feel like car theft is rampant, even if statistically it's rare.
Perfect example. It's a quick way to assess risk, but very prone to error, because vivid or recent information gets weighted too heavily. And connecting back to confirmation bias, like you suggested,
Yeah.
if we're already worried about something and mostly consume news, that highlights that threat.
It makes examples even more available in our minds.
Absolutely. Reinforcing the perception of risk, potentially inaccurately.
Wow. Okay, so we've laid out a whole minefield of these biases. The big question is, what can we actually do about them? How do we fight back?
It's not easy, but there are strategies. Forbes offers several good ones. First off, skill 1, identify and plan.
Just being aware?
Awareness is crucial, yes. But it's more than just knowing the names. It's recognizing how they affect you and making a real plan to address them. Forbes stresses that changing these automatic intuitions is hard work,
Takes real commitment.
requires strong emotional investment, realizing how these biases might be holding you back, and having a tangible plan.
Okay. What else? Forbes mentioned skill 2, delay decision making.
Yeah, a really simple but effective one. Just pause. Count to 10, maybe, if you feel a strong gut reaction.
Give your rational brain a chance to catch up.
Exactly. Let that autopilot settle down.
Oh.
Forbes notes for really strong emotional reactions, it might take 20-30 minutes for your system to calm down enough for more intentional thinking.
Good to know. Then there was skill 8, considering future.
Right. Thinking about the longer-term consequences, not just the immediate payoff. Asking yourself, how will this look in a day, a month, a year?
Getting some perspective.
Yeah, and looking for patterns in your decisions over time.
And skill 9, considering other viewpoints. Getting that outside view.
Crucial for objectivity. That could mean literally asking trusted people or experts for their take.
Or even just mentally stepping back and asking, what advice would I give a friend in this situation?
It's a great technique, yeah. Or using resources like Glassdoor for external perspectives on workplace issues.
Forbes also brought back skill 11, setting a policy.
Right, things like using decision aids, having predefined criteria for choices.
And fighting anchoring bias by deliberately pushing beyond that first number or impression.
Yes, considering a wider range. Organizational policies and pre-commitments, shelling points can also help structure decisions and reduce individual bias in groups.
And underlying a lot of this, Forbes really hit home that debiasing often involves that shift from autopilot to intentional thinking.
Absolutely. It maps directly onto Kahneman's System 1 and System 2 thinking, doesn't
It
it?
really does. That USAID summary and Strawson's review highlighted it too. Biases often come from System 1 fast, intuitive, shortcut loving.
While System 2 slow, deliberate, analytical is often, well, kind of lazy. So the key is consciously engaging System 2 more often to challenge those System 1 assumptions.
Okay. So wrapping this up, we've covered a lot of ground on these cognitive traps.
We really have explored how these mental shortcuts, while efficient in some ways, can systematically lead us astray.
But the good news is, as that implicit bias workbook says, awareness really is the first step, making the implicit explicit.
Forbes echoed that too. Identifying them is key to starting to manage them.
And like the workbook also suggests, it's really worth taking some time, for you listening to reflect which of these biases pop up most often in your own life, your work.
That self-reflection is powerful, understanding your own patterns.
Definitely. So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Given that we know we're all wired with these biases, how can we be more intentional about designing things?
You mean like our environments, our
Yeah.
processes?
Yeah, both personally and professionally. How can we set things up to support more rational, objective decisions, moving beyond just knowing the biases exist?
That's a great challenge, designing for better thinking.
Something to really chew on. Thanks for exploring the deep with us today.